In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
The reset. The reset. The reset. The reset. Set.
Deep within a bleak and dismal swamp, hidden beneath its murky waters, lies the headquarters of the most sinister villains of all time. A Legion of Doom.
The meeting will come to order. The Legion of Doom is now in session. It is the purpose of the Legion to align our infamous forces against the powers of good and defeat them, leaving us, the rulers of the world. To do this, we have gathered together the most ruthless villains on Earth.
Hello from the World Economic Forum in Geneva. My name is Adrian Monk and I'll be moderating today's session. Welcome to this virtual meeting which has brought together leaders and stakeholders from across the global community for our COVID action platform. Today, this meeting serves as a launch pad for the next chapter, the Great Reset. But to get us underway, let's hear from the forum's executive chairman and founder, Professor Klaus Schwab.
Thank you, Adrian. It is obvious that we are in the midst of the most severe crisis the world has experienced since World War II. 75 years ago, countries and people came together to shape the post-war global order, which brought us decades of peace, increased global cooperation and prosperity to hundreds of millions of people around the world. The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century. It has laid bare the fundamental lack of social cohesion, fairness, inclusion, and equality. Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight the real virus, but to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era. We have a choice to remain passive, which would lead to the amplification of many of the trends we see today. Polarization, nationalism, racism, and ultimately increased social unrest and conflict. But we have another choice. We can build a new social contract, particularly integrating the next generation. We can change our behavior to be in harmony with nature again. And we can make sure that the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution are best utilized to provide us with better lives. In short, we need a great reset. We have to mobilize all constituents of our global society to work together. We must not miss this unique window of opportunity.
I send you my warmest greetings and best wishes on the launch of the Great Reset. The COVID-19 pandemic is causing enormous human suffering and economic hardship. A microscopic virus has closed down entire countries and economies. But this fragility is not confined to health systems. Runaway climate change, unsustainable levels of inequality, and the lawlessness of cyberspace are all warning signs that we must heed. The Great Reset is a welcome recognition that this human tragedy must be a wake-up call. It is imperative that we reimagine, rebuild, redesign, reinvigorate, and rebalance our world. Rebalancing investment, harnessing science and technology, and advancing the transition to net zero emissions, all elements of the Great Reset are fundamental to building the future we need.
It is time, therefore, to align sustainable solutions with funding in a way that can transform the marketplace. This would be the most dramatic act of responsible leadership ever seen by the global private sector. We have a golden opportunity to seize something good from this crisis. Its unprecedented shockwaves may well make people more receptive to big visions of change. And as we move from rescue to recovery, therefore, we have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path. Encourage us all to think big and act now.
Nothing will stop us now. With our combined powers of evil, we must pledge to wipe out the Super Friends. One for all, and all for doom. One for all, and all for doom. One for all, and all for doom.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Abercast. I'm John Towers. This is night number 2 of the Democratic National Convention, and we're examining the very long, infamously long John Galt speech from Atlas Shrugged. Basically, this is him expounding. Ayn Rand said that this was the most concise, the most concise way that she could lay out the philosophy of objectivism. So, yeah. So there's that. I should have mentioned last episode that I am not narrating an audiobook, okay? I'm reading it real time just for my podcast. If you're gonna nitpick me with my reading, all's fair in love and war, everybody. But if you want to listen to the fucking audiobook, go fucking get Audible and fucking go listen to it. I'm sure some other poor son of a bitch has had to read this thing before anyways. So there's that. I'm not narrating an audiobook. And also, so I've mentioned Ayn Rand, Objectivism, and Atlas Shrugged. In some people's wheelhouses, these are all very controversial topics. So if this isn't your cup of tea, please go ahead and feel free to just skip past this episode. It is a midweek episode, which we all know, according to the rules of the podcast. They vary a little bit. This is when we do our philosophy episodes and our current events episodes, and even sometimes in episodes that could flirt with politics. So if you're not into this, or if you're a big lefty, welcome aboard. I'm glad that you enjoy the show, but you might want to just skip this one. Check back in on Sunday. You know, the Abercast is a weekly show, so the Sunday episodes will be about occult history, conspiracy, and violence. With all that, I feel like I'm explaining too much. So, yeah. So here we go. Let's fucking get into this thing. Rationality is the recognition of the fact that existence exists, that nothing can alter the truth and nothing can take precedence over that act of perceiving it, which is thinking. That the mind is one's only judge of values, the one's only guide of action. That reason is an absolute that permits no compromise. That a concession to the irrational invalidates one's consciousness and turns it from the task of perceiving to the task of faking reality. The alleged shortcut to knowledge, which is faith, is only a short circuit destroying the mind. That the acceptance of a mystical invention is a wish for the annihilation of existence and properly annihilates one's consciousness. Independence is the recognition of that fact that yours is the responsibility of judgment and nothing can help you escape it. That no substitute can do your thinking, as no pitch hitter can live your life. That the vilest form of self-abasement and self-destruction is the subordination of your mind to the mind of another. The acceptance of an authority over your brain, the acceptance of his assertions as fact, his say-so as truth, his edicts as a middleman between your consciousness and your existence, integrity, is the recognition of the fact that you cannot fake your consciousness. Just as honesty is the recognition of the fact that you cannot fake existence. That man is an indivisible entity. It's an integrated unit of two attributes, of matter and of consciousness. Gnosticism. Well, I should say duality, maybe. And that he may permit no breach between body and mind, between action and thought, between his life and his convictions. That like a judge impervious to public opinion, that's a ridiculous statement nowadays, he may not sacrifice his convictions to the wishes of others, be it the whole of mankind, shouting pleas or threats against him. That courage and confidence are practical necessities, and the courage is the practical form of being true to existence, of being true to truth, and of confidence is the practical form of being true to one's own consciousness. Honesty is the recognition of the fact that the unreal is unreal. And can have no value, that neither love nor fame nor cash is value if obtained by fraud. That is an attempt to gain a value by deceiving the mind of others, is an act of raising your victims to a position higher than reality, where you become a pawn of their blindness, a slave of their non-thinking and their evasions, while their intelligence, their rationality, their perceptiveness become the enemies you have to dread and flee. That you do not care to live as a dependent, least of all a dependent on the stupidity of others, or as a fool whose source of values is the fool he succeeds in fooling. That honesty is not a social duty, not a sacrifice for the sake of others, but most profoundly selfish virtue man can practice. His refusal to sacrifice the reality of his own existence to the deluded consciousness of others. Justice is the recognition of the fact that you cannot fake the character of men as you cannot fake the character of nature. That you must judge all men consciously or contentiously, as you judge inanimate objects with the same respect for truth, with the same incorruptible vision by the pure and the rational process of identification, that every man must be judged for what he is and treated accordingly. Not earned for a fortune or a love you don't deserve, for a loophole in a law of causality, for an A that becomes a non-A. At your whim, if you desire the opposite existence, you will reach it. Do not cry when you reach it, that life is a frustration and that happiness is impossible to man. Check your fuel. It brought you where you wanted to go. Happiness is not to be achieved at the command of an emotional whim. Happiness is not the satisfaction of whatever irrational wishes you might blindly attempt to indulge. Happiness is a state of non-contradictory joy, a joy without penalty or guilt, a joy that does not clash with any of your values and does not work for your own destruction. Not the joy of escaping from your mind, but of using your mind's fullest power. Not the joy of faking reality, but of achieving values that are real. Not the joy of a drunkard, but of a producer. Happiness is possible only to a rational man. The man who desires nothing but rational goals seeks nothing but rational values and finds his joy in nothing but rational action. So I'm going to take a second here to catch my breath and to wet my whistle and ask you, after reading that paragraph, if you can see why I'm tied up in this stuff, and if you can see why I also spent so much time on Thus Spake Zarathustra with Nietzsche, and why I have been and will be taking up so much time on Thelema and Crowley. Go back a couple seconds and listen to that last paragraph, and then listen to the master theory on doing what thou wilt doesn't just mean doing whatever the fuck you want. And some of those classic passages from Zarathustra we talked about in the so many Zarathustra episodes. All right, I got a lot to get there still, so I got to go. This also has to say, like, the things that I'm like, I half, hamedly say during the show, where I'm like, oh, look, this radical personal responsibility pops up all the time when we're talking about these occult or these magic episodes or whatever. Listen to it in here. Listen to it. Like, it's all over it. It's all over it. I know that Ayn Rand, when she wrote Anthem, she wrote it when she lived in England, I think. I'm not a Randian scholar. I'm not a proponent so much of objectivism. But I do know that she wrote this novelette or this book before everything else called Anthem. And it's like this dystopian thing about this weird society has crumbled back into like a dark ages, and everybody didn't like science, and this guy accidentally discovered a light bulb or something. But I know that when she did rewrites on that when she came to the States, and she republished it in the States after Fountainhead, I think, or maybe after We the Living. She rewrote it, and she dumped a lot of Nietzsche into it. And she said that there was a mild amount of Nietzsche in there, but you can find other places that are like, well, we need to talk about what she defines as mild then. So I'm not by any means dumping on Ayn Rand. I'm just drawing a connection between this and Nietzsche's The Link, right? So she's out here talking about this radical personal responsibility to the point where nothing else besides yourself matters to your existence. Like, just think about that. And she reaches out and links up with Nietzsche, at least for a time. And then Crowley also talks about how Nietzsche was like a prophet or something of Thelema. So I just needed to stop and just talk about that a little bit. I'm trying to keep my editorializing down because this speech is infamously long and I still have a long way to go. Where was I? Just as I support my life, neither by robbery nor alms, but by my own effort. So I do not seek to derive my happiness from the injury or the favor of others, but earn it by my own achievement, just as I do not consider the pleasure of others as the goal of my life, so I do not consider my pleasure as the goal of the lives of others, just as there are no contradictions in my values and no conflicts among my desires, so there are no victims. No conflicts of interests among rational men who do not desire the unearned and do not view one another with a cannibal's lust, men who neither make sacrifices nor accept them. The symbol of all relationships among such men, the moral symbol of respect for human beings, is the trader. Trader, not trader. We who live by values, not by loot or traitors, both in matter and spirit. A traitor is a man who earns what he gets and does not give or take the undeserved. A traitor does not ask to be paid for his failures, nor does he ask to be loved for his flaws. A traitor does not squander his body as fodder for his soul as alms, just as he does not give his work except in trade for material values. He does not give the values of his spirit, his love, his friendship, his esteem, except in payment and in trade for human virtues, in a payment of his own selfish pleasure, which he receives from men he can respect. The mystic parasites who have, throughout the ages, reviled the traitors and held them in contempt, while honoring the beggars and the looters, have known the secret motive of their sneers. A traitor is an entity they dread. It is a man of justice. Do you ask what moral obligation I owe my fellow men? None, except the obligation I owe to myself, to material objects, and to all of existence. Rationality, I deal with the men as my nature, and their demands by means of reason. I seek to desire nothing from them except such relations as they care to enter of their own voluntary choice. It is only with their mind that I can deal, and only for my own self-interest. When they see what my interest coincides with theirs. When they don't, I enter into no relationship. I let dissenters go their way, and I don't swerve from mine. I win by means of nothing but logic, and I surrender to nothing but logic. I do not surrender my reason or deal with men who surrender theirs. I have nothing to gain from fools or cowards. I have no benefit to seek from human vices, from stupidity, dishonesty, or fear. The only value men can offer me is the work of their mind. When I disagree with a rational man, I let reality be the final arbiter. If I am right, he will learn. If I am wrong, I will learn. One of us will win, but both will profit. Wow. Whatever may be open to disagreement, there is one act of evil that may not. The act that no man may commit against others, and no man may sanction or forgive, so long as men desire to live together. No man may initiate. Do you hear me? No man may start the use of physical force against another. Wow. To impose the threat of physical destruction between a man and his perceptions of reality is to negate and paralyze his means of survival. To force him act against his own judgment is like forcing him to act against his own sight. Whoever or whatever purposes or extent initiates the use of force is a killer acting on the premise of death in a manner wider than murder, the premise of destroying men's capacity to live. Do not open your mouth to tell me that your mind has convinced you of your right to force my mind. Force and mind are opposites. Morality ends where a gun begins. When you declare that men are rational animals and propose to or to treat them as such, you define thereby your own character and can no longer claim the sanction of reason, as no advocate of contradictions can claim it. There can be no right to destroy the source of rights. The only means of judgment, right and wrong, is the mind. To force a man to drop his own mind and to accept your will as a substitute with a gun in place of a syllogism, with terror in place of proof, and death as the final argument, is to attempt to exist in defiance of reality. Reality demands of mind that he act for his own rational interest. Your gun demands of him that he act against it. Reality threatens man with death if he does not act on his rational judgment. You threaten him with death if he does. You place him into a world where the price of his life is the surrender of the virtues required of his life, and the death of a process of gradual destruction is all that you and your system will achieve. When death is made to be the ruling power, the winning argument is a society of men. Be it a highwayman who confronts a traveler with an ultimatum, your money or your life, or a politician who confronts a country with an ultimatum, your children's education or your life. The meaning of the ultimatum is your mind or your life, and neither is possible to a man without the other. If there are degrees of evil, it is hard to say who is the most contemptible. The brute who assumes the right to force the mind of others, or the moral degenerate who grants to others the right to force his mind. That is the moral absolute. One does not leave open to debate. I do not grant the terms of reason to men who propose to deprive me of reason. I do not enter delusions with neighbors who think they can forbid me to think. I do not place my moral sanction upon a murderer's wish to kill me. When a man attempts to deal with me by force, I answer him by force. It is only as retaliation that force may be used, and only against the man who starts its use. No, I do not share his evil or sink to his concept of morality. I merely grant him choice, his choice, destruction. the only destruction he has the right to choose, his own. He uses force to seize a value. I use mine to destroy destruction. A hold-up man seeks to gain wealth by killing me. I do not grow richer by killing this fucking hold-up man. I seek no values by means of evil, nor do I surrender my values to evil. In the name of all the producers who have kept you alive, received your death ultimatums in payment, I now answer you with a single ultimatum of our own. Our work or your guns. You can choose either, but you can't have both. We do not initiate the use of force against others or submit to force at their hands. If you desire ever again to live in an industrial society, it will be on our moral terms. Our terms and our motive power are the antithesis of yours. You have been using fear as your weapon and have been bringing death to man as his punishment for rejecting your morality. We offer him life as his reward for accepting ours. You who are worshippers of the zero, you have never discovered that achieving life is not the equivalent of avoiding death. Joy is not the absence of pain. Intelligence is not the absence of stupidity. Light is not the absence of darkness. An entity is not the absence of a non-entity. Building is not done by abstaining from demolition. Centuries of sitting and waiting in such abstinence will not raise one single girder for you to abstain from demolishing. And now you can no longer say to me, the builder, produce and feed us in exchange for our not destroying your production. I am not answering in the name of your victims. Perish with in your own void. Existence is not a negation of negatives. Evil is not value. Is an absence and a negation evil? Is impotent and has no power, that which we let in extort from us. Perish because we have learned that a zero cannot hold a mortgage over life. You seek escape from pain, and we seek achievement of happiness. You seek for the sake of avoiding punishment. We exist for the sake of earning rewards. Threats will not make us function. Fear is not our incentive. It is not death that we wish to avoid, but life that we wish to live. You who have lost the concept of the difference, you who claim that fear and joy are incentives of equal power and secretly add the fear is the more practical. You do not wish to live, and only fear of death still holds you. The existence you have damned. You dart in panic through the trap of your days, looking for the exit you have closed, running from a pursuer you dare not name, to a terror you dare not acknowledge, and the greater your terror, the greater your dread, for the only act you could save, the only act could save you, the only act that could save you, the greater your dread of the only act that could save you. Oh, thinking. The purpose of your struggle is not to know, not to grasp or name or hear the thing that I shall not state in your hearing, that yours is a morality of death. Death is the standard of your values. Death is your chosen goal, and you have to keep running. Since there is no escape from the pursuer, who is out to destroy you from the knowledge that the pursuer is yourself. Stop running for once. There is no place to run. Stand naked as you dread to stand. But as I see you, and take a look at what you dared to call a moral code. Damnation is the start of your morality. Destruction is its purpose, means an end. Your code begins by damning man as evil and then demands that he practice a good which it defines as impossible for him to practice. It demands that his first proof of virtues and that he accept his own depravity without proof. It demands that he start not with a standard of value but with a standard of evil, which is himself, by means of which he is then to define the good. The good is that which he is not. It does not matter who then becomes the profiter of his pronounced glory and tormented soul, a mystic god that some incomprehensible design or any passerby whose rotting sores are held as some inexplicable claim upon him. It does not matter. The good is not for him to understand. His duty is to crawl through the years of penance, atoning for the guilt of his existence. To any stray collector of the unintelligible debts, his only concept of value is zero. The good is that which is non-man. The name of this monstrous absurdity is original sin. A sin without violation is a slap at the morality and an insolent contradiction in terms. That which is outside the possibility of choice is outside the province of morality. If man is evil by birth, then he has no will, no power to change it. If he has no will, he can neither be good nor evil. A robot is amoral. To hold a man's sin, a fact not open to his choice, is a mockery of morality. It's like she was writing this last week. It's so crazy. To hold man's nature as his sin is a mockery of nature. To punish him for a crime he committed before he was born is a mockery of justice. To hold him guilty in a matter where no innocence exists is a mockery of reason. To destroy morality, nature, justice, and reason by means of a single concept is a feat of evil hardly to be matched. Yet that is the root of your code. Do not hide behind the cowardly evasion that man is born with free will, but with a tendency to evil. A free will saddled with a tendency is like a game with loaded dice. It forces men to struggle through the effort of playing, to bear responsibility and to pay for the game, but the decision is weighed in favor of a tendency that he had no power to escape. If the tendency of his choice, he cannot possess it at birth, it is not of his choice. His will is not free.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that, plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
What are the natures of the guilt that your teachers call his original sin? What are the evil the evils man acquired when he fell from a state they consider perfection. Their myth declares that he ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge, he acquired a mind, and became a rational being. It was the knowledge of good and evil, and he became a moral being, and he was sentenced to earn his bread by his labor and became a productive being. He was sentenced to experience desire, and he acquired the capacity for sexual enjoyment. The evils for which they damn him are reason, morality, creativeness, joy, and the cardinal values of his existence. It is not his vices that their myth of man's fall is designed to explain or condemn. It is not his errors that they hold as his guilt, but the essence of the nature of man. Whatever he was, that robot in the Garden of Eden, he existed without mind, without values, without labor, and without love. He was not man. This is interesting because this goes to what we have unpacked with the Cain and Abel story. How Abel didn't create, he didn't do work, he was just a shepherd, right? Where Cain used his knowledge and the work of his hands to actually grow crops. And we see this again in Noah. He became a husbandman. He ran a vineyard. Man's fall, according to our teachers, was that he gained the virtues required to live. And these virtues, by their standard, are his sin, his evil. They charge that he is man. His guilt, they charge that he lives. They call it morality of mercy and a doctrine of love for man. No, they say, they do not preach that man is evil. The evil is only this alien object, his body. No, they say that they do not wish to kill him. They only wish to make him lose his body. All right, here we go. They seek to help him, they say, against his pain. The point, the torture rack to which they've tied him. The rack with the two wheels that pull him in opposite directions. The rack of the doctrine that splits his soul and his body. They have cut men in two, setting one half against the other. They have taught him that his body and his consciousness are two enemies engaged in deadly conflict, two antagonists of opposite natures, contradictory claims, incompatible needs, that to benefit one is to injure the other, and his soul belongs to the supernatural realm, and his body is an evil prison holding him in bondage to this earth. Okay, here we go. That's Gnosticism. So she's debunking it. She's saying, get that shit out of here. Her idea is that they are here to, I'm sure she's about to explain it. That the good is to defeat the body, to undermine it by years of patient struggle and digging his way to the glorious jailbreak which leads to the freedom of the grave. They've taught man that he is a hopeless misfit made of two elements, both symbols of death. A body without a soul is a corpse, and a soul without a body is a ghost. Wow, that's interesting. Yet such is the image of man's nature, the battleground of the struggle between a corpse and a ghost. A corpse endowed with some evil volition of its own, and a ghost endowed with the knowledge of everything known to man is a non-existent. The unknowable exists. Do you observe that what human faculty that doctrine was designed to ignore? It was man's mind that had to be negated in order to make him fall apart. Once he surrendered reason, he was left at the mercy of the two monsters whom he could not fathom or control, of a body moved by unaccountable instincts, and of a soul moved by mystic revelations. He was left as the passively ravaged victim of a battle between a robot and a dictaphone. He now crawls through the wreckage, groping blindly for a way to live. Your teachers offer him the help of morality that proclaims that he'll find no solution but must seek no fulfillment on earth. Real existence, they tell him, is that which he cannot perceive. True consciousness is the faculty of perceiving the non-existent, and if he is unable to understand it, that the proof of his existence is evil, and his consciousness impotent. As products of the split between man's soul and body, there are two kinds of teachers of the morality of death: the mystics of the spirit and the mystics of the muscle, whom you call spiritualist and materialist. Those who believe in consciousness without existence and those who believe in existence without consciousness. Both demand the surrender of your mind. One to their revelations, the other to their reflexes. No matter how loudly they posture in the role of the irreconcilable antagonists, their moral codes are alike. And so are their aims. In matter, the enslavement of a man's body and spirit, the destruction of his mind. The good say the mystics of spirit is God, a being whose only definition is that he is beyond man's power to conceive, a definition that invalidates men's consciousness and nullifies his concepts of existence. The good say the mystics of muscle is society, a thing which they define as an organism that possesses no physical form, a super being embodied in no man in particular and everyone's in general except yourself. Man's mind, say the mystics of spirit, must be subordinated to the will of God. Man's mind, say the mystics of muscle, must be subordinated to the will of society. Man's standard of value, say the mystics of spirit, is the pleasure of God, whose standards are beyond man's power of comprehension and must be accepted in faith. Man's standard of value, say the mystics of the muscle, is the pleasure of society, whose standards are beyond a man's right of judgment and must be obeyed as a primary absolute. The purpose of a man's life, say both, is to become an abject zombie who serves a purpose he does not know, for reasons he is not to question. His reward, says the mystics of spirit, will be given to him beyond the grave. His reward, say the mystics of muscle, will be given on earth to his great-grandchildren. Selfishness, say both, is man's evil. Man's good, say both, is to give up his personal desires, to deny himself, renounce himself, surrender. Man's good is negate his life he lives. Sacrifice, cry both. This is the essence of morality, the highest virtue within man's reach. Whoever is now within the reach of my voice, whoever is man the victim and not man the killer, I am speaking at the deathbed of your mind, at the brink of that darkness of which you are drowning. If there still remains within you the power to struggle, to hold on to these fading sparks which have been yourself, use it now. the world has destroyed you. The word that has destroyed you is sacrifice. Use the last of your strength to understand its meaning. You are still alive and you have a chance. Sacrifice does not mean the rejection of the worthless, but of its precious. Sacrifice does not mean the rejection of the evil for the sake of the good, but of the good for the sake of the evil. Sacrifice is the surrender of that which you value in favor of that which you don't. If you exchange a penny for $1, that is not sacrifice. If you exchange $1 for a penny, it is. If you achieve the career you wanted after years of struggle, it is not a sacrifice. If you then renounce it for the sake of a rival, it is sacrifice. If you own a bottle of milk and give it to your starving child, it is not sacrifice. But if you give it to your neighbor's child and let your own die, it is. If you give money to help a friend, it is not sacrifice. If you give it to a worthless stranger, it is. You give your friend a sum that you can't afford, it is not sacrifice. But if you give him money at the cost of your own discomfort, it is only partial virtue according to this sort of moral standard. If you give him money at the cost of disaster to yourself, that is the virtue of sacrifice in full. If you renounce all personal desires and dedicate your life to those who you love, you do not achieve full virtue. You still retain a value of your own, which is your love. If you devote your life to random strangers, then it is an act of greater virtue. If you devote your life to serving men you hate, that is the greatest of the virtues you can practice. A sacrifice is a surrender of a value. Full sacrifice is full surrender of all values. If you wish to achieve full value, you must seek no gratitude in return for your sacrifice, no praise, no love, no admiration, no self-esteem, not even the pride of being virtuous. The faintest trace of any gain dilutes your virtue. God damn it. Think of all the virtue signalers on social media. God damn it. If you pursue a course of action that does not taint your life by any joy, that brings you no value in matter, no value in spirit, no gain, no profit, no reward, if you achieve this state of total zero, you have achieved the ideal of moral perfection. You are told that moral perfection is impossible to man, and that by this standards it is. You cannot achieve it so long as you live, but the value of your life and of your person is gauged by how closely you succeed in approaching that ideal zero, which is death. If you start, however, as a passionless blank, as a vegetable, eating or seeking to be eaten, with no values to reject and no wishes to renounce, you will not win the crown of sacrifice. It is not a sacrifice to renounce the unwanted. It is not a sacrifice to give your life for others if death is your personal desire. To achieve the virtue of sacrifice, you must want to live. You must love it. You must burn with passion for this earth and for all the splendors it can give you. You must feel the twist of every knife as it slashes your desires away from your reach, and it drains the love out of your body, and is not mere death that the morality of sacrifice holds out to you as an ideal, but death by slow torture. You do not remind me that it pertains only to this life on earth. I am concerned with no other, neither are you. If you wish to save the last of your dignity, do not call your best actions a sacrifice. That term brands you as immoral. If a mother buys food for her hungry child rather than a hat for herself, it is not a sacrifice. She values the child higher than the hat. But it is a sacrifice to the kind of mother whose higher value is the hat, who would prefer her child starve and feed him only from a sense of duty. If a man dies fighting for his own freedoms, it is not a sacrifice. He is not willing to live as a slave, but it is a sacrifice to the kind of man who's willing. If a man refuses to sell his convictions, it is not a sacrifice, unless he is the sort of man who has no convictions. Sacrifice could be proper only for those who have nothing to sacrifice. No values, no standards, no judgment. Those whose desires are irrational whims, blindly conceived and lightly surrendered for a man of moral stature. Whose dreams are born of... I apologize for that, I'm sorry. I'm too far into this thing to edit that out. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm back up just a little bit. For a man of moral stature who desires are born of rational values, sacrifices the surrender of the right to the wrong and of the good and the evil. The creed of sacrifice is a morality for the immoral, a morality that declares its own bankruptcy by confessing that it can impart to men the personal stake in virtues and values, and their souls are sewers of depravity, which they must be taught to sacrifice by its own confession. It is impotent to teach men to be good and can only subject them to constant punishment. Are you thinking in some foggy stupor that it's only material values that your morality requires you to sacrifice? And what do you think these material value? What do you think are material values? Matter has no value except as a means for the satisfaction of human desires. Matter is only a tool of human values. To what service are you asked to give the material tools your value has produced? To the service of that which you regarded as evil, to a principle you do not share, to a person you do not respect, and to the achievement of a purpose opposed to your own. Else your gift is not a sacrifice.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Hey, did you learn something? Did you laugh? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of the Abercast and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means I can create a normal schedule for shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellowcraft episodes. By supporting the show, you are not only a listener, but you are a part of the show. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and support for our projects. Do you have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. My supporters are my partners. I currently pay for you to listen to the Abercast. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pocket, I volunteer my time and talent to each and every episode of the Abercast. The price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, the massive amounts of gin and tonic needed, the equipment it takes to record the shows, the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? I don't know. I'm proud of the Abercast, and I feel like I'm improving all the time. In addition to creating the show that you dig and that you are excited about. I also have a full-time commitment and other obligations. So why financial support? All of the supporters help me focus my time on the quality and development of the podcast. And what if you can't afford, $1 or $3 or $10 or whatever a month? Believe me, I get that. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a 5-star rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget that you could sign into the mailing list and still unlock a lot of bonus content. Thank you. I cannot put into words how much it means to me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback, support, and love of the stories that we talk about here is what keeps me going.